And to give us more details on this news story, I am now joined in by a political editor, Mr. Kartikeya Sharma. Kartikeya, indeed a very, very tragic yet concrete confirmation coming in there from our Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, who just confirmed that the 39 missing Indians in Iraq are actually dead and that their bodies were discovered in a mound in Mosul.
Yes, let me give you a backgrounder first as to what happened and how did this issue come into public light. You see, in the second week of June 2014, Indian officials in Baghdad had informed the government of India that 40 construction labourers, many of them from Punjab, who had been working on a government construction project in Mosul, have disappeared. That was the time when the ISIS was actually not only controlling regions in Syria, Iraq and other parts, but the power was at zenith, height. Then later the investigations took place. Then the whereabouts of the 39 Indians who were working in a war-torn Iraqi city, Mosul, were located to a certain area. Then the Indian officials went there and they found that they were taken away to a different spot. After that, the locals informed that most of them had died. Under what circumstances, it was not known. So what Sushma Swaraj had done was that she said that she will only say, or she will only confirm the death unless and until there is some sort of a DNA matching is done. She said this on the floor of the House in Parliament, and that is why today when she said that, you know, we have done the DNA matching of 38 bodies out of 39, basically what she was trying to say was that this is the conclusive proof, because, you know, after all, if you don't do proper DNA matching, you can always continue to have, you know, missing in action or people who are lost in war. But somehow she worked on this. Now what is going to happen is, first of all, what happened was that General V.K. Singh was sent there. V.K. Singh went to these areas for a fact-finding mission. He presented the report to the government. After that, the bodies were found and they were sent to Baghdad. In Baghdad, the DNA cross-checking was done. Now, issue here is that now what happens to the bodies? Sushma Swaraj has informed Parliament that General V.K. Singh, who is Minister of State in this government, will fly to Baghdad, arrange. They'll take by an Indian plane. All the bodies will be brought back with a proper death certificate. You know, there has to be some dignity after death, and I think that's what the government is trying to do. That in a proper and arranged manner, that the bodies will be brought back. They'll be handed over to the relatives, and I think the whole procedure will complete in another week or so, maybe 2 weeks. It depends when General V.K. Singh will fly off to Baghdad. But they were abducted. They were not released by IS. And one Indian, Harjeet Masih, who managed to flee making use of this opportunity, Masih claimed that all 39 men, barring him, were executed by terrorists shortly after they were captured. So one of the person who was captured and who ran away says that they were shot. However, the government at that point of time was not willing to buy Masih's claim, because Sushma Swaraj, she said that there were 6 other sources telling us 6 other things. But Masih was basically saying that all of them were caught. He escaped, but they were shot. So that's the brutality of the ISIS. That's what happened to religious minorities. Even in context of Shias, the Yazdis, the accounts are horrific. The way they executed men and children, abducted women, it's like a Boko Haram story. But what was unfortunate today was that when the proceedings in Rajya Sabha were taking place on 39 dead Indians, the whole house erupted and they took up the issue of, Andhra, which is one issue which has been dominating. And instead of giving time for a discussion, for an exchange of information, the House suddenly shifted gears and went back to what it is good at doing these days, which is creating noise. And I think that was in really poor taste today.
All right, Kartikeya, please, I'll ask you to hang in there right now. Let me quickly cut across to Daniele, who's also joining us live from Jordan. Daniele, we just heard our Foreign Minister in the Parliament. She's given us 2 confirmations. A, that the 39 missing Indians were found dead. B, that, you know, they were killed by ISIS. Could you elaborate for our viewers about these killings that were done by the ISIS?
First of all, it's unfortunately a sad news. I apprehend these And I personally have been for a month tracking the 39 Indians in the rubbles of Mosul and in the surrounding area closer to the Syrian border. There was the high possibility of them having been captured in death. So what could have happened is that in the moment when in 2014 the Islamic State entered the city of Mosul, these 39 Indians with other workers from other places in South Asia were working on a big residential complex meant for university students called the University Lake Towers in the city of Mosul. So the Islamic State came, and these 39 Indians, differently from others, could not escape, couldn't find a way out, so they have been trapped. The Islamic State used perhaps these 39 workers and other workers for their own purposes, which means to excavate all the trenches they needed during the fight, during the Battle of Mosul, and also they requested them to pull out all the material from the construction site that they would have needed in the days or years to come, when they knew that the coalition was going sooner or later to attack them. So this is what the Islamic State does with the workers when they find them, with foreign workers. Sometimes some governments are able to negotiate, but the problem is that the Islamic State was never willing to negotiate, and this was a major problem. It was virtually impossible for the government of India to try to understand if there was a way in order to take them. Unfortunately, we still have no precise details about where they have been brought after Mosul. We thought they were in a jail in Badoush, then we discovered that in Badoush, which is a village close to Mosul, there was no jail anymore. It was bombarded. There was the hope of them maybe being in Syria, because the Islamic State also carries along the workers that they find, because they are, of course, free. They're not paid, and the Islamic State needed very much the work of construction workers during the offensive. Unfortunately, these hopes are no more.
Right. Daniele, as you rightly mentioned, you've been closely tracking the story of the 39 missing Indians in Iraq. Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj also exclusively thanked the Iraq government, in helping them find out these missing bodies of the 39 Indians. How closely and how integral was actually the Iraq government in, this confirmation that's come in the death of the 39 missing Indians? Daniele, how? All right, we'll try and get back to Daniele again. This is the breaking news at the moment. Sushma Swaraj, Foreign Minister, has just addressed a session at the Parliament, giving a confirmation on the 39 missing Indians. She has just confirmed that their bodies were discovered in a mound in Mosul, where they were dug out and sent for DNA sampling. It were 38 bodies out of the 39 have been confirmed, whereas the 39th person's DNA has matched by 70%. She also thanked the Iraq government, the Minister of External Affairs, General V.K. Singh, who worked very closely with the Iraq government. And now we are back with Daniele, who's giving us more information and has been closely tracking this story of the 39 missing Indians. Daniele, I was asking you, how integral was the Iraq government in helping India to discover the status of these 39 missing Indians who've now just been declared dead?
We definitely must say that the Iraqi government surprised all of us. When I personally visited Mosul at a time when we were trying to find out if it was possible to find any track that could have given any hopes to the families of the 39 workers, the situation of the northern part of Iraq, especially of the city of Mosul, and from the city of Mosul to the border with Syria was a catastrophe. The entire western part of the city was reduced to rubble. All buildings were grounded. It was kind of a Herculean, if not impossible, mission to find 39 people. But the Iraqi government kept cooperating throughout the months from the victory in Mosul. And at the end of the day, even if this is not a good news, because obviously all of us, I mean, we would have wanted to find them alive somewhere, but at least the mortal remains are there, and at least the families know the fate. So the Iraqi government has been extremely cooperative, and I would say also efficient given the situation. Remember that there are calculation and talks about 18,000 people died in the sole Mosul offensive, many of them still underneath the rubble. When we were trying to find these 39 workers in Mosul, we met the Iraqi Civil Defense Forces. Every day they were at 7 at dawn. And nearly every day they were reaching the city of Mosul in order to recover corpses from the rubbles, and they came back with trucks full of corpses. So that was the situation. It was really a Herculean mission, and I would say that the Iraqi government surprisingly kept working on it, despite, of course, despite the necessity of managing a humanitarian catastrophe. So I think the government of India is very much right when it's thanking the Iraqi authorities for this.
Also, Daniel, you know, this news is extremely unfortunate, but again, it brings out the horrific, you know, absolutely heinous face out of, you know, ISIS.
Definitely, yes. That's why I said during our first conversation that we kind of expected that this could have been the fate of the 39 Indians. The Islamic State is a very brutal organization, especially it was a brutal organization with all those persons they did not consider good Muslims, which in their infamous way of interpreting a religion of peace like Islam meant nearly everybody. So for them, whoever does not precisely match with the ideology, with the pervert ideology they have of the religion, the religion of Islam, was not meant to be alive. Therefore, unfortunately, the last moments of the life of these 39 Indians must have been very tough and difficult. And as you said, this is sad news. I would have rather had a chat with you, rejoin because they were found alive.
Right. Also, Daniele, what can be expected now? When are the bodies of these 39 missing Indians who've been declared dead, when are they expected to arrive in the country?
There are technicalities. The Iraqi law normally wants the relatives of a family to recognize personally the corpses. At least this is the law of the country when it comes to Iraqi citizens. Since the DNA samples matched the DNA found on these corpses, I think that maybe in order to save a little time, this process can be spared to the families, because obviously it's a very painful and not easy process. General V.K. Singh is traveling personally to Iraq to take care of this, so I think now is a matter of days before the 39 Indians can go back to India, where their family will pray and lay them for the final rest.
Right. Let me now quickly go across to our political editor, Kartikeya Sharma, who's also joining us. Kartikeya, we just heard what Daniele had to say. Daniele has clearly mentioned that, you know, there will be technicalities involved and that General V.K. Singh will soon be in Iraq to bring back the mortal remains of the 39 Indians. Your take on that?
There are two things. You know, one was pretty disturbing from just the Indian point of view, that when this matter came up in the upper house, Rajya Sabha, you know, instead of letting it conclude with dignity, you know, people started fighting on an issue which was anyway has come up for discussion so many times, and was neither discussed nor debated, but political parties ensured that the House does not function. So I think that was a bit of a disappointment that even on a day like that, when Foreign Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj had to say that the DNA results had come and all of them were shot dead, as claimed by Masih, that they died in Mosul. they were captured by ISIS, and then this the way the MPs behaved, this came into the well, hijacked the proceedings of the House took place. Even the chairperson, who's supposed to be the Vice President Venkaiah Naidu, observe as to what's happening in this House. Ultimately, there are some moments on which you really need to have a bipartisan approach. You cannot have a partisan approach on everything. But now there are a couple of things which are going to take place. General VK Singh will be flying to Baghdad. VK Singh will get back the bodies. The bodies will come in Delhi. After that, they'll be dispatched to their respective places. For most of the laborers came from Punjab. Couple of them came from Himachal Pradesh. Their families, I think, would have been notified by this time around. After informing Parliament, once the families have been notified, then they would get in touch with the ministry. They would be handed back the bodies with death certificate. But it just goes on to show that how global this world has become, and just because ISIS is a distant horror doesn't mean it doesn't have the capacity to touch India. It does have the capacity to touch India. Innocent Indian laborers were shot dead just because they belong to a different religious denomination, dispensation. And I would say that today that chapter closes, because Sushma Swaraj very categorically said that unless and until we can verify and we can say that yes, they were Indians, these bodies are of those Indians who they had categorized as lost in war, they will not say that they have died. And today that chapter closes, and the Parliament was informed. I think similar statement will be made in Lok Sabha, but the lower house is not functioning. So it depends as to when Sushma Swaraj will get the time to make the statement. She can also lay the statement on House. It will be, instead of reading there, the MPs will be informed. Anyway, the statement has taken place in Rajya Sabha, but then once the statement was over, one could witness ugly scene inside the House. Even the Vice President expressed his displeasure, who happens to be the chairperson of the House. One has to see as to how the proceedings of the House go. But I would say that this tells us as to how bloody the war was, how brutal the regime of ISIS was, how people suffered, how diaspora population was working at various levels. They also suffered, because it's not that the Iraq was completely untouched. Indians have been going to Iraq from 1960s. Even in Kuwait, the West Asia, a lot of Indian migrant workers work there. It's a different diaspora than what we witness in America, but Iraqi diaspora is primarily a workforce diaspora.
Right.
And
Karthikeya, that's where I'm going to interject you, and I will actually go across to Daniele to actually elaborate for our viewers how integral, are Indian laborers in, to Iraq, considering there's a sizable population of Indian diaspora back in Iraq. Daniele.
Among the West Asian countries and also the Gulf countries, Iraq is where Indians are in their lowest numbers, because of course the country was not problematic only from 2014 when the Islamic State invaded it, but since the United States invasion, which by the way today is exactly 15 years from the beginning of that invasion, Iraq was never a stable country. But there was a presence of Indian workers in Iraq. Many of them are in the northern part of Iraq, that region which is called Kurdistan, which has been a way more peaceful place than the rest of Iraq. When it comes to these 39 Indians, among other South Asian citizens, majorly Bangladeshi, but also some from Pakistan, were working, as the majority of those South Asian citizens working in Iraq were working in the construction sector. They got a good job with a very large construction company in Baghdad, who won an enormous challenge. I mean, the Mosul governor back then wanted to renew the entire structure for the young people of Mosul. Therefore, the company needed workers immediately, so that's why they hired Indians. As I said, Indians in Iraq are especially focused on construction workers. They unfortunately do not live an easy life at all. We all know how difficult it is the situation of Indians, but of all South Asian workers working in the Middle East. Unfortunately, very often their employer are not generous at all. Their passports get seized as soon as they touch base in the country in order for them not to leave. As of now, as of today, the presence in the territory in Iraq south to the region called Kurdistan is very feeble, close to zero. In Kurdistan there are still Indians working majorly in the telecommunication sector. I personally met them and I personally knew them when they were there. Iraqi Kurdistan is a very safe place where these Indians have now found their homes and their place. But we are still talking about a minute presence in the entire Iraqi Kurdistan. We are talking a number which is even below 100. As I told you, Iraq is not exactly the place where it is easy to establish, to settle and to live. In other West Asian countries or Arab countries, the presence of Indians is way larger than that.
Right. Let me now also go across to Karthikeya. Karthikeya, with this news coming in, do you think that India would actually now take measures, any futuristic measures, to ensure the safety of the remaining Indians there in Iraq?
You see, the ISIS experience or ISIS regime was something very new when it comes to terrorism. Like for example, when Taliban took over Afghanistan, it did not take over Afghanistan as a terrorist group. It gave sanctuary to a terrorist group like Al-Qaeda. Taliban was sponsored by Pakistan but was in response to the anarchy which was unleashed by the warlords after Russians left. That was Taliban. Now ISIS was born as a jihadi terrorist group, but they came to occupy territory cutting across nations, and they also came to occupy economic assets, and they started to generate revenue, which means it became a state. It became a state covering parts of Syria, covering parts of Iraq, and it influenced people to migrate to these areas. That is why you had those people who were radicalized from UK, France, Egypt, Central Asia, some parts of Germany. They came to the ISIS areas to fight the war. It almost became like a religious pilgrim for them. So it was a different experience. Advisories go, yes. Individuals and organizations are warned not to go. For example, Indian workers were warned not to stay put in Libya. Some of them had to evacuate when war broke out. The civil war broke out after West decided that they're going to put an end to the Gaddafi's regime. But I would say that it's also a reminder of how fragile our global world is, how real the danger of terrorism and radicalization is, and how difficult it is to keep liberal regimes alive in times where on one hand you have the rise of the populist authoritarian leaders, and on the other you have a violent jihadi philosophy which does not include other religious, social, cultural denominations.
Right. Karthikeya, since it was a very, very hard task, let me also come back to Sushma Swaraj's, address in the parliament. She exclusively thanked the government of Iraq and also General V.K. Singh. So, here, let's not omit the fact that, the Iraqi government has played a very integral role.
Absolutely, Iraqi government played a very integral role. Indians have helped Iraq. It's not that Indians have not helped Iraq. India had a very good relationship with Iraq, and Iraq had a relationship which the paradigm changed post invasion. Paradigm of our relationship with Iraq changed when Kuwait was invaded by Iraq, and when America decided to invade Iraq. That was after that our relationship changed for good. But it's not as if Indians were not going there, Indians were not doing business there, or Iraqis were not coming here. You'll be surprised to know that India is a prime destination for people of Afghanistan and Iraq for medical treatment. In India, the medical treatment, for example, your heart surgery, kidney, some forms of cancer is highly affordable. People cannot, even the elite cannot go to America and afford a treatment there. So it's not as if India has not handled a diaspora population of these war-torn areas. West Nizamuddin, East Nizamuddin, you'll find a lot of Afghan expat population. in areas of central Delhi, you will find Iraqis. Why? Because India had a long, intimate relationship with these areas. People were going there for work and they were coming here for work and other things. For example, I gave you an example, medical treatment.
Right. Also, let me quickly go across to Daniele now. Daniele, how do we look at, the current day Mosul after, it's been liberated from the clutches of ISIS, and, it was only post that liberation that General V.K. Singh was actually sent over there to find out these 39 Indians.